right, is everybody ready? We'll go ahead and call the Tuesday, June 9th County Commission meeting to order. We'll start with a moment of silent reflection for our first responders and members of the armed forces, followed by our invocation by Pastor Doug Voigt with Pathway Church, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Tim ZORC. If everybody would please rise.
Lord God, as we gather in this chamber this morning, we come before you. We're humbled that we can have access to you because you call us to pray and you invite us to yourself each and every day. Thank you for this county. What a blessing it is to live in this county. God, thank you for all the blessings and benefits and things that we enjoy. But Father, we pray for every citizen, every leader, community leader, so many serving in this community. We're grateful for them. And Lord, I pray that you would lead this meeting, that you would govern and preside over this particular meeting. I thank you for each person here and so many others that work with them. You've appointed them, and we know there's no mistakes with God. And we also know that with God, all things are possible. Lord, we live in a day when there's a lot of trouble, a lot of fear, people looking for hope, looking for answers. And God, I pray that we would take to heart all that you've told us in your holy scriptures. Thank you for sharing these words. When you go through deep waters, I will be with you. When you go through rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. When you walk through the fire of oppression, you will not be burned up. The flames will not consume you. Don't be afraid, for I am with you, says God. Don't be discouraged, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will hold you up with my victorious right hand. And you also say, see, God has come to save me. I will trust in him and not be afraid. The Lord God is my strength and my song. He has given me victory. So Lord, that is our prayer, that you would give victory to this county in all its many departments, all that happens in this county. We pray that you would lead and guide. You are the sovereign Lord, and you see all. You know all, and you love us with infinite love. So thank you for your presence, your power, your ability to do beyond what we could ever imagine or think. And thank you for Jesus Christ, who died on the cross to give us hope and life. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. The first item on the agenda is additions or deletions to the agenda.
Madam Chair, with the board's permission, I'd like to move Emergency Services item number 2, 15A2, to follow the consent agenda so that we can get our Emergency Services Chief back out working.
All right, sounds good. Any other additions, or Chief, do you want to go back to work? I'm kidding. Any other additions or deletions to the agenda?
Madam Chair, move approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Flesher with a second by Commissioner O'Brien. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. There are no proclamations or presentations this week, so we'll move on to approval of the minutes of February 18th and March 3rd regular meetings.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner O'Brien with a second by Commissioner Flesher. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. There is one informational item. I'd just like to note that this is a letter from or regarding the 2020 Environmental Lands Bond Referendum, and they are not moving forward with that referendum this year. They will be regrouping and looking at doing that in the future.
And Madam Chair, just to follow up on that, I have spoken with them quite a bit, and just like the Children's Trust people, I think that they're showing good sensitivity to the community. I know they were very anxious to move this forward, but with all that's happening, I think it's a very good thing they have stepped back and we can look at this down the road, maybe with an eye towards 2022. But certainly, I think it's a very good move on their part. I want to thank them for recognizing that.
Yes, thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you for pointing that out. All right, with that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Does anybody need to pull anything from consent? Anybody from the public wishing to pull anything from consent? Seeing none.
Move to
Madam
approve.
Chair, move approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner O'Brien with a second by Commissioner Flesher. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And with that, we will move on to 15A2, which is purchase of parcel of property for new location of Station 7. Jason?
I'll move staff recommendation on that.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner O'Brien with a second by Commissioner Flesher. Any discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Zorc.
Thank you. I have a few questions on this. And reading the backup material on the appraisal, I know there's a long history, but the seller purchased the property on March 18th for the $175,000, and here we are early June offering $430. Not saying he's not entitled to the value of the property, but after doing a site inspection, I wanted to see if there's some things we could put into our due diligence to protect the taxpayers' dollars. One, I wish it was one lot to the west that would be cleared, filled, water and sewer connections at the curb, filled to curb height, you know, those types of things. If we could put if Rich from Public Works could work up these estimates, that if the site improvement cost exceeded $200,000, that we would renegotiate or continue some type of negotiation with the seller. That would include site fill, which looks like it's going to be about 4 to 5 feet approximately based on looking at the site. We have to do 2 an in and out canal crossings for the ditch that's out front. Those are about $20,000 a piece. The water and sewer is on the east property line, but they're not, we have to wet tap into those. Those can be, I don't know, $3,500 to $5,000 a tap. Then we have to have some type of small lift station or grinder pump put on the site. Those types of items, if those exceed if Rich's estimate exceeds $200,000, that we look to have a conversation with the seller, and I'd take whatever Rich's estimates are for, not the clearing, because every site usually has to be cleared, so I'm not so concerned about that, but fill, access, water and sewer, if those items exceed $200,000, we would renegotiate or have a conversation with the seller, or offer the same value per square foot for the property that it's located on the west property line of this that already has all those features included, which would be essentially a few hundred feet to the west, where they have master storm water and sewers in place, and they're essentially filled to back a curb elevation. And if that could be added to the motion, that would depend if the maker of the motion would consider that.
I'm not, well, one, legally, I mean, is that something you can put in there, Dylan? And would the seller be, if I'm the seller, I wouldn't want to have some what if hanging over me myself. I don't know.
So in the contract, we have a 15-day due diligence period. And if we have the ability in the sole and absolute discretion to determine whether the property is suitable. So Commissioner Zorc has raised a number of different issues about access, fill, water, sewer, and the like, put a kind of a $200,000 number on it. My interpretation of it would be, it wouldn't necessarily be a change of the contract terms. It would just simply be, that would be one of the factors or criteria that we would analyze in the due diligence period that made it unsuitable. And Commissioner Zorc, is that kind of the way you were thinking about it?
Right, that if the appraisal is based on some of the comps that I've seen out there, is kind of the retail street number. If we want to answer this or not, with the seller just purchasing this very recently, March 18th or 17th, I know, was a restriction why we couldn't have reached out to the prior seller that sold it for 174. Maybe there was a valid reason why we couldn't. I know we've been looking out there for years, so I don't know what constraints there would have been to have a conversation with the prior owner.
We did reach out to the prior owner, and we could not get access to the 18th Street, and couldn't get the access easement because it's not a platted roadway in the old plat that the county had. So we did reach out to them, and because we couldn't get the access easements straightened out, we went ahead and looked at several other properties that are in the general area, including inside that old industrial park, which is right to the west. The current owner did not want to sell us a parcel or two that was inside that industrial park. And I also looked at a parcel that was closer to State Road 60.
To the front, right.
That one was problematic because of the filled-in pond that was in there and those types of things. So we looked at a number of parcels that were actually in that general area, trying to find something that was suitable for us, but to keep it as small and compact as we possibly could.
Right. Well, if Rich could bring back by the next meeting his engineer's estimates, present them to us, that can be part of our due diligence window. And if we have, is this also a 6-year use it or lose it on collected fees? If so, we can encumber that money and dedicate it for a site selection purchase, so we're good on that side. I don't know if that's a factor with the funds that would be used to complete the purchase. When you collect impact fees, if you don't use them within a certain time period, they have to be returned to the payer.
Right, so I can address that. We're not using impact fees for this one. The funding source is Emergency Services District. We had budgeted the purchase of the property from Emergency Services District dollars. I would like to say on the water and the sewer, a couple of the other issues, the cost to tap the force main might be higher than if there were a gravity sewer there, but this is different than, we've looked at some other properties where we would have to run, several hundred feet of water or sewer lines, so we don't have that here. So whereas there will be a cost for a lift station and the tap, water and sewer are available right there. And then just I know there was the recent purchase there, but they didn't have the access. The owner of the property is now the same owner as the person who's developing that industrial park to the west, which has access, which has ownership of the 18th Street, which gives us the access we need. And I had initial concerns about the difference in the prices, but the purchase price is based on an appraisal performed by a local appraiser, I think Boyle and Drake. So we've definitely purchased property in excess of the appraised value before when we're doing right-of-way, but this one is in accordance with that appraisal that has been done.
All right.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, so Jason or Tad, if for whatever reason Rich's number comes out higher than where Commissioner ZORC is and we don't buy this parcel, do we have another parcel lined up readily available, or do we have any options if we don't move on this one?
I have nothing left in that general area, which is where I would prefer the fire station to be. We can continue on with our searches, but we've been doing that for over 6 to 8 months now, trying to find a parcel that would work for us.
Yeah. I'm a little bit optimistic with the new owner of the industrial park that hopefully things will start moving in there. I know he's working on bringing it all up to compliance and be shovel ready. And I know he's been talking to a lot of different other companies about moving in there. So trying to be optimistic, I think there might be more of a demand for some industrial land. So I appreciate Commissioner ZORC's frugalness and wanting to keep an eye on costs, but I think I'm going to let my motion stand as it is, just to go ahead and approve staff recommendation.
Okay. That is the motion, and that did have a second from Commissioner Flesher. Is there, yes?
Clarification, for curiosity, do we want Rich to do those numbers or not? Or just find out? I know when we received the J.C.'s property, which was a gift. We had no cost in it, but I believe our site improvement costs were $437,000 for that piece. So free sometimes has a cost. Same with the Go Line Bus Hub on 17th Street. It was a $1 a year lease from the City of Vero, but we were somewhere approaching that $500,000 site improvement cost to get the site buildable. That I think you just have to, you should be aware of what those numbers are. It may still go forward. One last question for Chief Stone. The prior owner of the industrial park, that has since changed hands. Have we, and I believe they're related parties to this seller, now that that is moving forward to get buildable or sellable lots because they never got their final plat, you know, if this didn't go through, we could ask that current owner, would they consider selling a site?
We had identified 2 lots that were in there, lot 27 and I believe 28, and I'm pulling from
Right.
history here. And we were interested in purchasing those 2 lots. But when we went back and had additional discussions with the current owner of that parcel, he wanted to use that entirely for his project and warehousing and those types of things. That's why we couldn't go forward with those 2 lots that were actually inside the industrial park.
Okay, so back to the question, are we curious to know or just find out after we put it out?
I don't mind having Rich come back, give us the numbers, but I don't know if it has to be next week.
Or just within that period?
Maybe just within the next month or so. I don't want to make this a priority for Rich and his people. But yeah, I'm fine if we want to have Rich put the numbers together and get back to us, but I just don't think we need it next week. I think Rich has other things on his plate too.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other discussion? Anybody from the public? Seeing none, we do have a motion by Commissioner O'Brien to move staff's recommendation with a second by Commissioner Flesher. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
To the chair, do you just want to take care of the minutes for the Emergency Services District so we can
Yeah,
just
we
get
can
them
certainly
wiped
do
out?
that.
Move approval of February 18 minutes.
Second.
All right, I have a motion by Commissioner O'Brien with a second by Commissioner Flesher. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Chief. All right, then we will move on to public notice items.
Thank you very much. To the chair, we actually have notices of 2 public hearings coming up. First is a public notice of a public hearing scheduled for June 16th, 2020. This is concerning the extension of the temporary moratorium regarding biosolids. This will be legislative in nature. And then a second public hearing also for June 16th, which will be to consider an application for a Class E1 certificate of public convenience and necessity by iTransit LLC. This will be administrative in nature. And those are our 2 public hearings scheduled for June 16th. And with that, I turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to community development. Consideration of holding a referendum to renew the county economic development ad valorem tax exemption tax abatement program. Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
And as stated, the item before you today is the consideration of holding a referendum to renew the county, sorry, I kind of jumped into this. I should stop and say, my name's Bill Shute, for the record, Chief of Long Range Planning, and been working with the Economic Development Council for years, and glad to be here today. So, all right, so as stated, this request is for consideration of holding a referendum to renew the county economic development ad valorem tax exemption tax abatement program. Now, the current tax abatement program was approved via a voter referendum held on November 2nd, 2010, and will expire on November 2nd, 2020, unless it is renewed by the electors again. In order to renew the program for another 10 years, the Board of County Commissioners must authorize a referendum to renew, and voters must approve. That's per Florida Statute 196.1995. So before you today, the BCC should consider whether or not the tax abatement program should be renewed, and if so, the BCC should authorize the county attorney's office to draft an ordinance that would, one, include ballot language for a voter referendum in November 2020 to renew the tax abatement program for another 10 years. There are 10-year increments per statute that you renew them for. And two, modify Title XI or Title 11 of the New River County Code of Ordinance to extend the tax abatement program should it be renewed for another 10 years. Now, this did go before the Economic Development Council recently on May 19th, 2020, via Zoom meeting. And the EDC ultimately voted unanimously to recommend that the Board of County Commissioners move forward with a referendum requesting that the tax abatement program be renewed for another 10 years. Now, the purpose of the tax abatement program is to incentivize the establishment of new businesses that create new jobs, paying above the average area wage. In the current Indian River County hourly average wage is $20.10, and it equates to approximately $41,808 per year. And the purpose is also to incentivize the expansion of existing businesses that similarly create new jobs which pay above the average area annual wage. Now, the BCC has authority to grant a reduction in ad valorem taxes for specified tax authorities. In the case of the tax abatement program, we're only looking at the general fund, the municipal services taxing unit, and the emergency services district. That's for up to 10 years. Other taxing districts, such as the school, water management, mosquito control, hospital, Florida Inland Navigation, land acquisition bond, which in this case was recently voted to pay off, I think on May 19th, and other special district taxes, they receive no abatement. So you collect 100% of tax increases over time and the existing taxes prior to establishment of the business or expansion of the business. Eligible businesses. So this applies to new tangible personal property and new real property. So we're not just talking about the building itself, we're talking about the equipment inside and that's necessary for the operation of the business. Now, eligible businesses include industrial and manufacturing companies with at least 10 new wage eligible jobs. And on this slide, I highlighted in yellow, including target industry businesses. This is a new category that was added since the county last adopted the tax abatement program. So it expands it, and we'll get into that a little bit later. New corporate offices with at least 50 new wage eligible jobs, and then also a business organization establishing at least 25 eligible jobs with a sales factor resulting in a high ratio of exports. It gets very complicated in how they word it, but the key there is exports. And now, with respect to targeted industries, this is an image right from the state website. The state has programs, and has for years, that they try to incentivize and attract certain key industries to the state. Businesses that typically would have an export factor, and they might be able to locate in other states. And just broadly looking, you can see the columns and the image area. You got clean tech businesses, life science businesses, infotech, aviation and aerospace, homeland security defense, financial professional services. And at the bottom, they have some emerging technologies and other manufacturing. Now, past use of the county's tax abatement program. So over the 10-year period, we had 3 applications submitted to the county. 2 were for minor expansions to small businesses, and the businesses applying decided the incentive ultimately was not significant enough to pursue. So they had met with staff, we worked with them, went over the numbers, and ultimately decided not to pursue it. One of the applications did move forward, and that was for INEOS New Planet Bioenergy. That was approved by the Board of County Commissioners in 2011. It's actually, when you approve these, they get included as part of the ordinance. So if you go to Title XI, it's actually included in that ordinance now. Now, one factor that contributed to the low number of applicants was the Great Recession. Looking specifically at the INEOS site, now they had an average of 58 employees with an average annual wage of $64,707.25. Now, not to keep jumping in this, but INEOS, I think many of us know that they were here for a certain number of years. I'm going to get into that with a slideshow. But they had some economic challenges and changes. They worked out with the new technology in ethanol, trying to produce ethanol, and some of the subsidies and government support for that kind of seemed to go away over time. So, and the technology was experimental and new, but they were here for a number of years. They did provide an average wage of $64,000. They had a total investment of $54 million, and $46 million was in tangible personal property, and another $7 million was in the real property in the buildings, facilities. Here is a table showing the taxes that they paid and the taxes that were abated. The abated are the light pink, red, first three rows. You can see County General Fund, County Municipal Services, Emergency Service District. The total taxes paid over the time period, you had $25,000 for the general fund, $8,000 for municipal services, and $17,000 for emergency services. Now, all the ones in white are ones that they collected 100% of the taxes. And you can see going all the way across to the right, the school district, they had 1.4 million when you add the two together, 910 and 516,000. At St. Johns River, mosquito control, hospital, and Florida Inland Navigation and Land Acquisition. Now, the very bottom row that, this doesn't totally mesh with the table above, but it shows the amount abated over time. So that would have been the taxes they did not pay for those first three rows, and that total off to the right was 1.13 million, and then that's in red. And just above that red is the green, where they show that they paid 1.822 million in taxes. So a difference of 700,000 roughly. So they paid $700,000 in taxes over the time period 2013 to 2016. Now, looking at the another side of the benefit in terms of wages, so they paid to employees. They end up paying nearly $24 million in employees' wages over that time period. This does not include employees that were here for the construction of the facility, so there is additional benefits that you don't see, but many of these people were living in the community, might have bought homes, they were going and shopping in stores, so they had all these other impacts in the community as they lived here and spent money. Now, this is why I briefly mentioned the NES facility. It closed in early 2017 due to various issues that I talked about. The tax abatement at that time was suspended, and the tax abatement benefit was applied only during the years NES was in operation. So this is a program where they only receive the benefit after the fact, really. After we verified that they have the jobs in place and been paying wages, they had a substantial investment in the facility, then they get the benefit. Now, the county is continuing to collect taxes on the property at a reduced rate because a lot of the equipment's no longer there, but we are collecting taxes as before. So looking to the future, if the board decides to move forward with this as a voter referendum, what's the potential in the county for it to be used? Well, the tax abatement program is available throughout the county, so it's not just limited to just a certain area of the county. Of course, it only applies to 3 categories, as mentioned before, for the taxing districts. So it could be allowed in the cities, but it's only for those county taxing districts. Vacant industrial land in the county's opportunity zone. So at the EDC, we reviewed this a little bit too. The opportunity zone is another area that was federally designated. It's all the area west of I-95 in the county. And it's another tax program, nothing to do with local tax collection, but it's more of investments and people that invest in the stock market and their dividends and things, and a vehicle for them to invest in property and businesses in a community. Now, the opportunity zone area, we have the Indian River Park of Commerce. It's been platted for ever since I've been here, early 2000s. 23 lots. Vero Beach Business Park has 28 lots. That's just south of the Indian River Park of Commerce off of State Road 60. Here's an air photo showing the location of the Indian River Park of Commerce, and right next to it is just a quick scan of the site showing the number of lots in that platted subdivision. CVS is called out there in dark gray, and you got blue as retention ponds, and a lighter gray some parking around the CVS. But you can see all the areas south of CVS are platted lots. Vero Beach Business Park, it's plus or minus 49 acres. Again, it's directly across from the CVS distribution facility and the Park of Commerce there. And you can see, again, numerous lots and the site plan off to the right You can see the gray is the road, the blues are retention areas, all the area with the lines that there are all lots that are potentially available. And I understand there's a new owner involved with this, so there's some hope that this is gonna be moving along. Potential benefit to different size companies, we did some analysis. I don't know that we wanna look at every row here, but the basics are, you know, what would happen if a company with 10 new employees, that's the minimum number of employees that we have for qualification, by the way, and they do a small expansion of 5,460 square foot, what's the projected tax abatement? So we ran some numbers, it's $13,203. So small business, you can see it's not a huge number. This tax abatement program can be up to 10 years, those taxes are abated, so that number represents amount over a 10-year time period. Scenario number 2, what if we times that by 10 and say 54,600 square foot expansion and 100 employees? Here's where we start to get a little bigger numbers. You get 231,000 potentially in taxes abated. And then if we reduce that to 28,000 square foot expansion, we get $123,000 in potential taxes abated. Now, with respect to the area communities, we also look to see what area counties have tax abatement programs. And you can see on the map, virtually all the ones shown in the area have tax abatement programs. Okeechobee is the exception. So if you look at, as far as a tool for economic development in the county, and considering we have to be competitive, if you start eliminating economic development programs, then that goes to the argument, you know, how competitive are we if we're not offering the same programs as adjacent counties? So that's just a point here. Advantages and disadvantages of tax abatements. So I don't know that I want to go through every bullet point here, but there's a list of advantages and some potential perceived disadvantages, and kind of hit upon some of these in the presentation. You know, loss of the county's tax rolls, we kind of went through that scenario with INEOS, so you have an idea what that means. But employment opportunities, you saw in the INEOS example, and mentioned it provides a tool for economic development, and over time it boosts the tax base, and it's a temporary time period, up to 10 years. After that 10-year period, all the tax abatement goes away, and they have to pay 100% taxes. So that's a key point to note as well, in the 3 county taxing districts as well as the other ones that they've been paying. So in conclusion, renewing the tax abatement program ensures that Indian River County will remain competitive with other counties in the state when a company is considered to relocate. There are no significant limits to tax abatements. No abatement can last longer than 10 years. Tax abatements apply only to a portion of ad valorem taxes as discussed. They pay 100% of the other taxing districts as reviewed. And with that, staff and the Economic Development Council recommends that the Board of County Commissioners move forward with a referendum requesting that the tax abatement program be renewed for another 10 years. And staff also recommends that the Board of County Commissioners direct the County Attorney's Office to draft an ordinance that includes ballot language for a voter referendum in November 2020 to renew the tax abatement program for another 10 years and modifies Title 11 of the New River County Code to extend the tax abatement program should be renewed for another 10 years. Let me just make one more quick comment. I put various attachments with the agenda item. One was an application packet. So at this point, we haven't been proposing at the staff level to modify any of the past stuff that's been established, so like the scoring criteria and things. So we didn't dive into that in the staff report, but of course, you know, at the board's discretion here. Thanks.
All right, are there any questions from the commissioners for staff? Yes, Commissioner.
Don't have a question, but just a comment. I received a text this morning from Dory Stone, the Executive Director of the Indian River Chamber, and she was unable to attend this morning, but she wanted me to pass on that the Chamber is fully in support of of us putting this on the referendum for the tax abatement. So I just want to pass that on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Commissioner Solari.
A few comments for whoever wants to make a motion if they'd consider. One is, first, this was drafted, part of this was drafted by the state, and I always like to point out problems once you get the state involved. In the first tax abatement, they said that you want a high ratio of exports. Fine, good. But then the last item they add in the new tax abatement is something about the source of supplies. They want information on the source of supplies and materials from within the county, basically buy local. So they're telling you you want to export, but also buy local. Well, if everybody in the state has to worry about buying local, then everybody else is not going to be able to export so much. So I always love it when they do economic contradictions in the economic development portion. So that's off my chest statewide. Locally, Bill had in the backup a phrase about problems, misconception of the tax abatement being a gift to large companies. Well, it is a gift. It's a subsidy, and a subsidy is a gift. So it's, and given that in probably about 100 speeches on All Aboard Florida, I ranted about the subsidies that they're giving All Aboard Florida. I just want to be consistent. Shouldn't be anything wrong with a subsidy. It's whether or not it's appropriate policy. So with that said, then the bigger problem with it is that, no, not problem, but it was only used once in the 10-year period. And they added the thing about the buy local stuff. I would like if Bill could look at the application, and when he adds this, to make it as simple and easy as possible. We had the jobs grant program, and one of the problems with the jobs grant program was that it was too complicated for the people who want to use it. So the most important thing I'm saying today is if we can make this as simple as possible so we don't scare off possible applicants, I think that would be a plus. Because evidently, a lot of people who might benefit from this and other aspects of our economic development program are just scared off by the length of time and complication of dealing with the paperwork. So, I mean, I'm happy to have this as one of the package of economic development that we have for this, but if we're serious about it, we need to make it as simple, clear, and easy to use as possible. With that, thank you.
I would agree that the simpler for the applicant, definitely, the more applications we will typically get. Because it is very, your eyes start crossing when you read some of that wording. But I did have a question kind of to follow up to Commissioner Solari. As you pointed out, there was only one applicant in the past 10 years, but I see that we're expanding who could apply to the targeted industries as well. I'm assuming that the EDC suggested that, or that was part of the conversation to kind of throw that dragnet out a little bit larger and try to encourage more companies to apply or to relocate here. Is that part of the reasoning behind that? Or is it just?
Well, it goes back to state statute, so
Okay.
the allowance is in there.
Okay.
I think the state increased allows for those now, so we've added.
So okay, perfect. Other comments? Yes, Commissioner ZORC.
Yes, just for clarification, I've talked with the administrator about this. So scenario, company moves into a existing building but puts in $5 million of equipment inside. Is that tangible equipment inside the facility that the shell may have been existing, but they had to put their production line process technology or whatever it is they have? I did a facility tour not too long ago, and they said, this is our new widget maker. They're $350,000 a piece, and we hope to add many of these as business picks up. So would that be an allowable, same premise, other than it's the part of the manufacturing process versus the shell of the building that houses the manufacturing process?
Well, when I look at the statute, so that's what we need to point back to, and they really just focus on the jobs part of it.
Right, yes.
And, establishing 10 or more new jobs, that's new business, but the expansion is establishing 10 or more new jobs and employ 10 or more full-time employees in the state.
Okay.
So it seems to be that they focus on that part. Now, of course, the only things that are eligible would be the new things that are required for that, I think, those new jobs. That's kind of the way I've understood
Right.
it over time.
And that would be have to go hand in hand, that the people that are going to run and supervise this piece of technology in the manufacturing process, that you have to generate the 10 jobs or more.
I think it'd get more complicated.
So In my mind, I think what Bill's talking about is the number of jobs kind of getting the thing, but at Commissioner ZORC, as to what it applies to, I can certainly say from the statute, it says it may exempt from ad valorem taxation up to 100% of the assessed value of all improvements to real property made by or for the use of a new business, and of all tangible personal property of such new business, or up to 100% of the assessed value of all added improvements to real property made to facilitate the expansion of an existing business, and of the net increase in all tangible personal property acquired to facilitate such expansion of an existing business. So there does seem to be some tangible personal property
So
language.
it sounds like they would be in good shape. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Anything else? No? All right, Commissioners, what is your pleasure on this?
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner O'Brien. I will give the second to Commissioner ZORC. Any further discussion? Anybody from the public? Seeing none, all in favor, oh, I'm sorry. Welcome.
A banker approaching wearing a mask, right? Hey, good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm Bill Penny, 36-year resident of Indian River County. I'm currently president and CEO of Marine Bank here locally. I've been on the chamber board for many years, and we've worked very hard on economic development and job creation, trying to create more good jobs for our local citizens. I appreciate your support on this, and we urge you to support the renewing of the referendum, and then we'll urge the public to vote for the referendum. It's just another tool in the toolbox of job creation that we need. And as Bill showed us, if we don't, we're one of the few counties other than Okeechobee that don't have it. And it is somewhat limited in scope. It's not a huge financial impact for the county. So I appreciate your support and urge you to approve it. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, Bill, before you leave, I want to give you a chance for a shameless plug here. How much of the SBA money did Marine Bank distribute to local businesses? And these were the dollars that local businesses could use to make payroll and keep people employed for a period of time. So, Bill, I know your Marine Bank was very aggressive and active in this. What were your numbers so
Thank
far?
you, Commissioner. We have, as of yesterday, it was 724 loans for $60 million, which is 20% of our entire size before this whole thing started. So I've got a great team, and they've worked tirelessly, and I think that equates to about 8,000 or 9,000 jobs that we helped facilitate.
Awesome,
So
Bill.
very proud of that. Thank you.
Good work. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Definitely. Anybody else from the public? All right, we do have a motion by Commissioner O'Brien with a second by Commissioner ZORC. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And we will move on to emergency services. The first item is approval of change order number 2 for radio system P25 migration project.
Chair, move approval.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Flesher with a second by Commissioner Solari. Any discussion? Anybody from the public? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And that will be followed by the signing of work order number 5 for radio system P25 migration project.
Madam Chair, move approval.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Flesher with a second by Commissioner Solari. Any discussion? Anybody from the public? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. And with that, we will move on to Commissioners' Matters. First item under Commissioners' Matters is Commissioner ZORC's discussion on postponing increases. Commissioner ZORC.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Let me just pull up a couple things here. So again, as we're still kind of in the recovery and phase in mode of turning our local economy back on, what we're seeing in the day-to-day inspection activity and the current to-date submittals are either from something from, commercial could be 12 to 18 months ago to single families that were sales in January, February, early March. So that is keeping our demand going. Our inspectors are still busy doing a full day's work and doing a good job keeping up with the demand. But again, it's the pipeline. COVID did a couple of things. One, it created huge economic uncertainty. And secondly, if you're still wanting to move a project forward, the project doesn't move forward as fast through the outside consultant side because of the You know, some people are working remotely, some are working part-time at the office, some are things. So the flow of getting a project into the pipeline, into community development, is not as fast as it used to be. There's a number of folks that have projects that have been working on for some time that are, fortunately, sound like they're still interested in bringing those forward, which I'm appreciative for. So in my agenda item asking for, let's take a pause for 6 to 12 months, look and see where we can look back on a little longer period of time of what the effects has. And I just use a couple of scenarios. One, I think most of us are familiar with the reserve at Vero. It's got Outback, it's got Chick-fil-A, and a office retail banking that's under construction. Prior to us decreasing our fees in 2014, they could never get the financial model to make sense to work, where a big contributor to that was the impact fees were just very high. Once they dropped, they said that was what took that project from sitting on the shelf to actually moving it forward. That project, if it was done today, would pay, under the new fee structure, about $400,000. And that has a trickle-down effect of the local option sales tax. That project paid roughly an estimate of $150,000 in the 1 penny local option tax. And we like our 1 penny local option tax. It pays for a lot of good capital items and rolling stock that we have used in the past. Of the other construction activity from 2019, looking at some of our annual reports, you know, $6 to $8 million a year is estimated to come from the construction activity, which is a very large percentage of the total. Let's see, our total from, I think, was $17 million roughly last year. So more than half of that is coming from the construction development activity, which again helps generate a lot of local option tax. Again, the pipeline is still down 35 to 40%. What's in the pipeline is moving slower because of, you know, some people are starting to come back to work into the office, but many of them are still working remotely, and that paperwork process just does not work as fast as it had prior. So my request, before I had asked for a 12-month pause to take a look back, I've changed that to 6 or 12 or somewhere in between. Also, these projects that once they've come online, you know, the new construction, I think once the final numbers come out, we're going to see a very large number that has contributed to our general tax base here in the community. That, you know, a large double-digit number. Also, one other thing, the reserve, that entire project paid $1,052,000 in impact fees, and again, under the new schedule, that would go up $400,000. One of the 10 items that staff brought up at the last time this was discussed, of the 10 items, one was a new project at 82nd Avenue and 60. That project was a 71,000 square foot grocery store, I think 3 out parcels. Again, that one is looking at an increase of $450,000. So these are big dollars that can, when these guys put these in, they plug in the numbers, land cost, building, this, get to the end, and it either says it makes sense to do it or it doesn't. And the bigger that number gets, the closer it gets to tipping that balance. And again, that would generate, again, approximately $150,000 in local option sales tax, and still pay, again, like the reserve, paid $1,052,000 in fees, that's a significant number, but to think that that'll go up closer to where if you did it today, $1.5 million, that's a large increase. I think there's some folks here that may want to, I don't know, how would you like to do that, Madam Chair? Have a motion or hear from them, or?
Well,
Go ahead.
I mean, if there's we would need a motion to move forward in
Okay.
some way.
All right.
And then I would ask my fellow commissioners if they had any questions or comments.
So the motion would be is to suspend the impact fee increases with the exception of the affordable housing elements that had the reduction elements for a period of 6 months, and then have staff bring us back prior to that, kind of a look-back opportunity of what has really the effects been in a longer window. So a 6-month postponement of the increase, and then at some time before that 6 months comes, have staff bring back the effects of what we've gone through.
Okay, there is a motion by Commissioner Zorc. I hear a second. Seeing none, motion fails for lack of a second. Did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yes. So with lack of that moving forward, each time this has come up, I asked, would we reflect the contract impairment process that we used last time in 2006 for contracts for a period up in 2005, when the impact fees were being increased at that time. Anybody that could produce a viable contract that said they were contracted prior to the increased date were eligible to be vested under the old rates. I asked that we institute the same form that community development in their process that they implemented the last time this came up, to just reuse that same process that was used last time.
Okay, is that a motion?
Yes,
Or
Madam
is
Chair.
That is a motion?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second to Commissioner Zorc's motion?
I'll just second it so I can ask staff a couple questions, because I don't know if I was sitting here when that was done. Jason, do you have any recollection of it, or?
I recall that happening. 2005 is when we added all of the new impact fees. Prior to that, we basically had impact fees for traffic and utilities, water and sewer. 2005, I believe, is when we added the ones for like recreation, law enforcement, fire rescue, public buildings, and all that stuff. We added about 6 new impact fees, many of which we have discontinued since that time period. So I think that, I remember that becoming a big issue there, and there was a substantial increase in the impact fees then. So I think that's, and it's pretty fuzzy. I think the issue of the contract impairment came up, and then the attorney's office reviewed each of the contracts, is the way I remember it, for a certain period of time. I don't remember what it was, but I think it was when we added all of those new impact fees, and I think there may have been some case law on that about when you have a new impact fee. Like, we didn't used to have a school board, an education facility impact fee. That was added along with about 5 others, and I think there was some case law there that talked about when there is a new impact fee. So I think that's my recollection. It was some time ago, though.
I see Mr. DeBraw might be able to add a little to that.
Good morning. Bill DeBraw on behalf of the County Attorney's Office. I apologize for missing my item this morning. I've got a dead truck in the driveway. But yes, I remember the first impact fees when they came in. What we did was we said that anybody that had an existing contract, and that was one of the keys, that it had to be an existing contract. Most of them were for the sale of a house or for construction of a house, that if they would submit the contract, we would go ahead and review it and approve it. If they went forward. If they never went forward, obviously it just expired. But there were a number of, probably a couple of 100 contracts that I know that I reviewed. But that was the important factor, is that there had to be an existing contract in order for it to be able to qualify for the reduced amount as far as the impact fees, or the old amount for the impact fees.
Okay. And then maybe this is a Phil question or Jason, but if we were to move forward with this, is there a way that we would make sure that the savings would be directly attributable to the home buyer and not just the savings that the developer is passing on?
Oh. I think this is probably most pertinent to the affordable housing savings. To me, I've been wrestling with this in my head over the multifamily savings, because you don't come and buy an individual condo unit and build it yourself. You buy a condo unit in a building that a developer is building. So I've been trying to think about how that gets passed along. On the single-family home buyer from affordable housing, we have provisions in there that you can keep the savings, but you have to pay it back, whoever owns it, if they sell it at a profit. if
I'm
they
not
sell it
worried
to
about the
somebody
affordable
above 80.
housing end of it.
So beyond affordable housing?
Commissioner ZORC is saying, tomorrow, I sign a contract to have a home builder build me a $300,000 home.
Mhm.
I don't pull the permit until after Friday when the new impact fees go into effect. Under Commissioner ZORC's proposal is, since I signed the contract today, prior to the impact fees going into effect, when I do come to pull my permit, I pay the existing impact fee and not the new impact fee. Is that correct?
Right,
Yeah.
that's the policy.
So that's what he's looking at.
And I'm thinking it's pertinent to commercial, because for in residential, it's not changing much. It's not changing much at all in residential, so it might not even be an issue. On the commercial fee, let me defer to Dylan a little bit and think about this. So if somebody, he seems real happy at that prospect. So
Is there a way we could legally do what Commissioner O'Brien is asking?
So, from a legal standpoint, the issue boils down to is, and the case law talks about it, and I've talked with Commissioner ZORC about it, is there would have to be sort of a case-by-case analysis, kind of like what Bill talked about happened 14 years ago. You'd have to have a contract, and you'd have to be able to demonstrate that there was the payment of impact fees, or you'd have to figure out whether the contract had contemplated the payment of impact fees and the number of impact fees, and that may cause some sort of impairment of contract costs. In shifting it from the buyer to the seller issue, I don't really see that as part of the impact of contract or impairment of contract style issue. I think the issue is it can't impair and cause essentially the contract to be unworkable due to the increase in fees and costs.
And I think it'd be hard to do, because you're basically saying, okay, we're doing commercial, let's say it's somebody's building a Dunkin' Donuts for someone, and then are we getting into a contract of, well, the price that you should be paying for that Dunkin' Donuts to that builder or developer should be X? It would be hard to.
I'm hearing
to
the
do.
answer is no.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing too.
Yes.
I think we're going way off the reservation here. I mean, I thought when the initial motion wasn't seconded that we could just peacefully go on. Brian, you want to hand those things out? I mean, basically what we're trying to do here again is have government micromanage aspects of our business, which I always think is a mistake. We talked about, idea of demand slowing, demand hurrying. We have no idea what's going to happen. So Commissioner ZORC says demand slowing. Saturday morning right after the newspaper got there at 5:30, which was a little late, unfortunately, the Wall Street Journal has an article, which I'm handing out, that the top of it says, pent-up demand lifts May new home sales 21% survey finds. Just a couple of lines from that article. Sales of newly built homes surged in May, a new survey shows. The latest sign that the housing market is already recovering from a sharp drop in home sales due to the pandemic. Mortgage applications for home purchases in the week ended May 29th also rose for the 7th straight week, up 5.3% from a week earlier and 17% from a year earlier, according to the Mortgage Bankers Association. Sales were strongest in Florida, up 59% for the year. So and it goes on. So I don't know why we'd want to interfere with that. I don't know if they're going to go up or down, but I'm not bright enough to try to manage the economy in Vero Beach, let alone the United States. When Commissioner ZORC was talking about a lot of the stuff, he was talking about commercial businesses. Well, in the Great Recession, one of the biggest problems we had was all this empty commercial space. We're going through a pandemic, which people are talking about changing the way people do business permanently, which indicates to me we may end up with a lot more commercial space. So just while the community may have a problem with a lot of vacant space, and those who remember the Great Recession in Indian River County will recall that having a lot of unkept vacant space in the community was an incredible detriment to the community. So just when we may be facing something like that again, we're going to subsidize more building of space, which we probably won't need, and maybe, but who knows? I don't. So I always tend to think in times like this, it's best for us to just set general policy, which I believe we did by recommending the tax abatement program, but stay away from trying to micromanage the economy itself. So I will not be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Solari. Anybody else?
And I'll be glad to go ahead and pull my second.
Okay, so is there anybody else to second Commissioner Zorc's motion? All right, seeing none. Yes, quickly.
So what guidance is the county attorney's office going to give to the policy that they have on file to use?
Well, I would say that that was for when, as I understood the conversation, but again, part of the problem with that matter is there was no backup. And I don't remember what the heck happened in 2005, and I hate to say too much, gleaning just from a couple comments that people make who haven't studied the issue. But this was, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, this was basically when new impact fees were being made, and people, the public, could be surprised by what government was being done. That's not the case now because, first, we haven't added new impact fees, and second, a couple times ago when we discussed impact fees, we made part of our motion that in a number of years, I think 3 to 5 years, we would review the impact fees again. And which we did, just like we said, just like we told the public we would be doing years ago, and which I believe this is something that's still in place. So any idea of that surprise, I think, has been totally taken away by not only the ordinance, but the fact that we made the whole process very public all along the way. So the reasoning, as well as I could glean, for that 2005 thing is no longer in place and certainly not applicable in Indian River County today.
All right.
All right.
With that,
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the lively discussion.
you are welcome. With that, we will move on to Commissioners' Open Dialogue. I will start off with just a reminder that the census is still moving forward. We do have a little bit of extra time with that, and our numbers in Indian River County are actually, reported numbers are doing very well. But I just want to remind everyone to continue to fill out those forms and get that sent in.
The last I saw on that, I think we were number 9 in the state for percent completion. So
Yep. We're doing really, we're actually doing really
very
good,
well, yeah.
and
all to the leadership of the Census Committee Chair. I would
we have a great census
assume.
committee. And actually, the city of Sebastian is ranked number 4 in the state as far as cities go for their response rate, and even our hard-to-count populations are doing very well. So I thank everybody for that. Let's see, why don't we start down with Commissioner Flesher? Commissioner Flesher, any?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I
excitement?
just want to commend Jason and the staff for working with many issues that we had furloughed some of the infrastructure needs due to economic conditions. Over the years, we have collected substantial impact fees, and as we have noted in the early discussion, that it needs to be spent. It needs to be invested back in the community that it was intended for. And it's being done so now, and I don't believe that the pandemic has any impact upon that. And I want to thank Jason and his staff, particularly Rich, in looking at many of the projects and infrastructure concerns that need to be addressed, and they are going forward. And I look forward to an update that we'll be having from Jason on what projects have been addressed. I guess that's prior to the budget hearing, hopefully. But I just wanted to say thank you. I did not quite understand the whole process on the impact fee discussion, did not want to comment at that point because I did not believe that it was going to be seconded. But I just want to say that, you know, we've gone through some tough economic times in this county. I know that, well, Commissioner O'Brien and I have traveled most of that together, and with sunshine. But we've had impact fee discussions so many times, And in the end, comparatively to all other counties, we have collected a fair amount of impact fees, and they have addressed the needs and concerns. The only factor here that we have had to travel was the economic factor. And you might add that, well, if you collected fees, why did that alter? Well, there are other aspects involved with the projects, and we had to be concerned with other matters. So now it's time to catch up a little bit, and I just want to say thank you to Jason and the staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Fleischer. Commissioner Solari, I know that you looked like you're teed up for our lively educational segment. Do you want to go last? Do you want to?
It's up to you. Right now, all I can say is I'm feeling for Peter, as I do during times like this, because he's gone months without major sports events. I mean, he missed that thing in basketball that they do with the 64, whatever. And,
March Madness.
that's it. I knew it had something to do with some month, and so much more. Well, in my case, I've got to read some nifty stuff, which, incidentally, the coronavirus has actually been part of. I mean, who would think? So I'm just going to read one paragraph from a book that I've been reading, finished, and another one from an article, which I just think is so much fun. So this will let people know what my sense of humor is like. If people remember when they're talking, especially in New York with Governor Cuomo and President Trump, when they were talking about who's in charge, they kept on talking about federalism. And who the heck knows what federalism is? Well, this guy, Forrest McDonald, he knows, and he wrote some of the best stuff on federalism. I'm just going to read a couple sentences from him. This is the essence of the federal system: the division of power along a vertical axis by removing some of it from the central originating point, the states, and shifting some of it up and some of it down the axis. That is, set some of it up to the new federal level and some of it down to the local level. And there's an article in the National Review by this guy, Charles Cook, and he took some of that and put it into everyday terms of things that have happened. I've watched, and I'll quote the paragraph from Mr. Cook, I've watched with mild irritation as the governor of Florida has been criticized in the national press for waiting until April to issue a stay-at-home order. The apparent assumption of his critics being that until the order was finalized, we Floridians were living it up with abandon. Rest assured that we weren't. Where I live, the restaurants closed a month ago, the beaches and the malls closed 3 weeks ago, and the liquor store had a "don't panic buy" warning in the window since the end of March. By the time the Governor DeSantis made it official that we were expected to stay our houses, I wanted to ask him, sure, as opposed to what? So this was actually federalism working the way it's supposed to do. The local government doing those things they could do best locally, led in this case by Jason Brown, who had powers during the emergency. State level people actually doing what they were supposed to be doing, and as the federal government is wont to do, interfering with it ought not to. But I think that this is just such a great example of federalism that it just makes me totally forget that we're missing some sports events. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that. I always look forward to our educational segment.
Oh, absolutely.
Commissioner O'Brien?
Well, let me first thank Commissioner Solari for his concern over my well-being. I greatly appreciate that, Bob. As we've reopened our county back up, we have had an uptick in cases. I think there's some concern, but kind of looking at the big picture, at 167 positive cases, and looking at the number tested, we're still down at a 2.2% infection rate, which is, in my mind, extremely low. And so while we do want to keep an eye on these new cases, I don't think we're anywhere near panicking or anything like that. So, and then just to compare it a little bit, so we're 167 cases, 2.2%. St. Lucie County, 654 cases, 4.4%, still fairly good. But Martin County is getting hammered right now. Similar population to Indian River County. Martin County has 917 cases and an 8.3% infection rate. So clearly, I think we're seeing the impact of having 3 closed counties just to your south border and the migration over into Martin County, creating some issues there. So Again, yeah, we've had a little uptick in cases. I don't think it's a panic by any means. We'll continue to watch it, and, you know, we'll keep posting our numbers and stuff. But I think right now, at 2.2%, we're doing very, very well. I do find it interesting. I wish somebody would do a social behavior study, because you go to certain stores like the grocery store, and it's probably about 80% of the people are wearing a face mask or some protection. You go to a different type of store, maybe a home improvement store, and it's kind of the opposite, only about 20%. So I think, and going along with, you know, kind of what Commissioner Fleury was reading and talking about, it'd be a really interesting, I think, social behavioral study, just to see what different retail compliance rate with mask wearing is on. So anyway, with that, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Brien. Commissioner Zork, anything?
Yes, couple things. Commissioner Solari, I thought politics was a sport. So it has continued on. It's just a different type of sporting event. It's politically related. You know, the debates on the impact fees that we've had since January, I hope I'm completely wrong and that the economy takes off and just does gangbusters. I'm just concerned that it may not. So that's what's been driving this. You know, I look back on our membership into the Indian River Lagoon Council. That took 3 times to get that passed, and I'm glad that it did, and I'm glad that the success rate that they've had and that we've had partnering with them. And with that, I don't think I have time to bring it up one more time before the effective date of June 14th, but can't say that I didn't try.
All right. Thank you for that. And we will move on to Solid Waste Disposal District.
Madam Chair, move approval of the January 21, February 11, February 18 minutes.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner O'Brien with a second by, was that Commissioner Flesher?
Yes, it was, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any discussion? Anybody from the public? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is request to purchase EnviroBlocks from Interblock Retaining Systems Incorporated.
Madam Chair, move staff recommendation.
Second?
I have a motion by Commissioner Solari with a second by Commissioner Zork. Any discussion? Anybody from the public? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Seeing none, we stand adjourned.